In 1954, a psychologist took 22 ordinary boys to summer camp. No war, no crisis, no history of hatred between them. Within days, they were stealing, sabotaging, and physically attacking each other over flags, team names, and made-up games. They didn't come from rival tribes. They were turned into rival tribes. The experiment was supposed to last 3 weeks. The hatred that emerged could have lasted a lifetime. If you look at politics in 2026, at social media, at culture wars, at how friend groups and even families are splitting over identities, beliefs and symbols, you start to see something uncomfortable. We aren't just analyzing that experiment anymore. We are living inside it. The tribal warfare phase has begun. The experiment was called Robber's Cave. The lead researcher, Muzafer Sherif, wanted to answer a brutal question. How easy is it to turn us versus them into real hostility? Not between historic enemies, not between people with deep ideological differences, between normal kids with no prior conflict. So he recruited 22 11 and 12-year-old boys from similar backgrounds. White, Protestant, middle class, all screened for psychological stability. No outliers, no obvious troublemakers. He took them to a park in Oklahoma, Robbers Cave State Park, and told their parents this was just a regular summer camp. The boys had no idea they were walking into one of the most important social psychology experiments of the 20th century. Sherif built the camp in 3 phases: formation, conflict, then attempted reconciliation. It's the same 3-act structure that now plays out in politics, online communities, and even workplaces. In phase 1, he split the boys into 2 groups that had no contact with each other. Each group lived in a separate area of the park. They didn't know the other group existed. Within days, each side developed its own identity. They chose names. One group became the Rattlers, the other the Eagles. They made flags. They built rituals, inside jokes, hierarchies. Leaders emerged. Rules about who was cool and who wasn't, what behavior was expected to belong. Nobody forced this. It emerged naturally. Humans are wired to sort into tribes and invent meaning around them. Then came phase 2, manufactured conflict. Once group identities were strong enough, the researchers discovered there was another camp. They arranged competitions between the Eagles and the Rattlers. Tug of war, baseball, treasure hunts, simple games. But the prizes were limited and zero-sum. One Team S victory meant the other Team S defeat. The rewards weren't just trophies. They were status, pride, bragging rights, access to resources like better food and privileges. Within days, the boys went from mild rivalry to open hostility. They taunted each other, used slurs, raided each other's cabins, stole possessions, burned flags. Rocks were thrown. Fistfights broke out. They refused to eat in the same room. Remember, these were 11-year-olds who had never met before. The only thing separating them was a name, a flag, and a scorecard. Sherif called this realistic conflict theory. When groups compete over scarce rewards, even invented ones, hostility follows almost automatically. You don't need deep differences. You only need a structure that says, if they win, you lose. That's enough. Today, the scoreboard isn't a camp trophy. It's elections, follower counts, promotion slots, algorithmic visibility, cultural status. The flags aren't hand-painted banners. They're hashtags, party logos, identity labels, brands, even conspiracy theories. The kids at Robbers Cave started to see the other group not as individuals, but as stereotypes. Rattlers are cheats. Eagles are cowards. In 2026, versions of that sentence are everywhere, just with different labels. Left versus right, urban versus rural, vax versus anti-vax, globalist versus nationalist, normies versus woke, and 100 other binaries. Once those mental shortcuts are in place, any conflict, no matter how small, gets interpreted as proof that they were the problem all along. Now, here's where it gets more disturbing, and where the tribal warfare of 2026 starts to look worse than anything Sherif could have imagined. At Robbers Cave, the researchers had to work hard to create the conditions for tribal conflict. Separation, identity formation, competitive games, scarce rewards. In our world, we've automated that process. Social media sorts us into groups with similar views, then shows us content that maximizes engagement, which often means outrage. Algorithms surface the worst examples of the other side and hide nuance. News channels brand themselves around political niches, rewarding their audiences for loyalty and punishing them for doubt. Even brands and influencers are pressured to pick a side on every issue. We haven't just created tribes, we've industrialized the production of tribalism. If you were watching this and starting to see your own life in this pattern, family group chats that exploded over politics, friendships that quietly ended over a vote, comment sections that feel like war zones, take a second. Subscribe and tell the comments which country you are watching from and whether you feel this tribal pressure where you live. The goal isn't just views, it's data from real people inside this global Robbers Cave. Back in 1954, the final phase of the experiment tried to answer another question. Once the fire is lit, can you put it out? Sherif first tried what most people think should work. Bring the boys together for contact. Joint movie nights, shared meals, casual time. It didn't work. The boys sat separately, mocked each other, threw food. Simply putting rival tribes in the same space did not reduce hostility. It sometimes made it worse. Sound familiar? Think about how often dialogue panels, televised debates, or comment section arguments actually deepen animosity instead of healing it. What finally worked was something more demanding: superordinate goals. Problems that neither group could solve alone, but both cared about. The researchers sabotaged the camp's water supply. The boys had to work together to find and fix the blocked valve. They staged a breakdown of the camp truck. The only way to get food was for both groups to pull the truck uphill together. Slowly, grudgingly, the Rattlers and Eagles stopped seeing each other as pure enemies and started seeing each other as necessary partners in solving a shared problem. By the end of the experiment, they were riding home on the same bus, sharing seats, even pooling prize money to buy everyone ice cream. The lesson Sheriff drew was brutal in its simplicity. If you design a world where everything is a zero-sum contest between labeled groups, you will get tribal warfare. If you want peace, you have to design shared goals that are more important than winning against the outgroup. In 1954, that design was manual, staged in a state park. In 2026, the design is accidental, or worse, indifferent. Our systems reward the exact opposite of superordinate goals. Outrage drives clicks. Polarization keeps audiences. Niche identity makes for better marketing. The incentives are misaligned with coexistence. We are, right now, deep into our own robber's cave. Phase 2, strong identities, constant competitions, and increasingly real-world sabotage. Online mobs trying to get people fired, swatting and doxing, culture war legislation that exists more to own the other side than to solve a concrete problem. Economies and neighborhoods sorting by politics so thoroughly that people rarely meet someone who genuinely disagrees with them in good faith. The boys in 1954 needed only a week of rivalry to start raiding each other's cabins. How many years of curated outrage does it take to make entire generations see each other primarily as enemies? In the next block, this can go deeper into how superordinate goals might work or fail at national and global scale, and how much trouble we are in when different tribes done to even agree on what the shared problems are. But for now, ask yourself one thing. In your own life, are you being pulled toward more cooperation across lines, or more loyalty to your side at all costs? Your honest answer to that question is the most accurate measure of where we really are in the 1954-2026 timeline. In 1954, the experiment ended when adults decided it was over. In 2026, there is no one to blow the whistle. That asks what makes this phase of tribal warfare so dangerous. There is no clear researcher standing outside the system, no neutral superintendent ready to say, "Stop, this has gone too far." The incentives now run in the opposite direction. Politicians, media outlets, influencers, even some activists gain power, money, or attention by keeping the conflict going, not by cooling it down. In Robber's Cave, the boys got status by being loyal to their group and hostile to the other. Today, that logic has been scaled up and wired into the architecture of our information ecosystem. Tribal identity has become a kind of operating system. It tells people what to think before they see the facts. In the camp, once the boys became Rattlers and Eagles, every new event was interpreted through those labels. If a Rattler cheated, the Rattlers downplayed it or justified it. If an Eagle did the same thing, it was proof that Eagles were fundamentally dishonest. The behavior was identical. The label changed the story. Now swap Rattler and Eagle for your local political parties, ideological camps, or cultural tribes. The same pattern holds. When our side bends rules, it's necessary. When their side bends rules, it's corruption. When someone on our side says something extreme, it's taken out of context. When someone on the other side does it, it's proof they're dangerous. The facts don't change. The jersey colors do. This is why debates so often feel hopeless. People aren't really arguing about evidence. They're defending tribe stories. And the more evidence you present that threatens the tribe's story, the more defensive people become. Sheriff's boys didn't want to hear that the other team had good players, good intentions, or similar fears. Admitting that would weaken the bond inside their own group. In 2026, losing an argument online can feel, at a subconscious level, like a betrayal of your people. So it's easier to double down, block, mute, report, or retreat into spaces where everyone already agrees. The platforms we use every day supercharge this dynamic. At Robber's Cave, the researchers had to carefully construct situations to trigger rivalry. Now the triggers are constant and automated. Algorithms learn, very quickly, what outrages each group and serve them a steady stream of content that confirms their fears and anger. Quiet, nuanced voices are boring to the system. They don't generate enough engagement. But clips of the worst behavior from the other tribe, angriest protesters, most insulting tweets, most absurd statements, spread like wildfire. Each side ends up seeing a caricature of the other, the equivalent of judging all eagles by their most reckless member and all rattlers by their most vicious prank. If you're still here with this, consider subscribing and leaving a comment about one place in your online life where you have personally seen this caricature effect at work. Naming it out loud is the first step in resisting it. Sheriff's key discovery was that contact alone doesn't heal tribal hatred. Bringing rattlers and eagles into the same mess hall without changing the incentive structure just led to more food fights. Translated into 2026, simply telling people to have dialogue or listen to each other in spaces where status, attention, and metrics still reward tribal performance is almost pointless. People show up to win for their side, not to understand. Joint panels, comment sections, even some bipartisan initiatives end up as theater, each tribe performing for its own audience, recording clips to bring back to camp as proof they destroyed the opposition. What did work at Robbers Cave were superordinate goals, tasks that mattered to both groups and that neither group could solve alone. The boys had to fix a water supply, pull a stuck truck, pool resources to watch a movie. None of those tasks made sense if one team won and the other lost. The only victory was shared. In today's world, we actually have plenty of superordinate problems: climate risks, aging populations, financial instability, infrastructure decay, technological disruption, pandemics, energy transitions. But there's a catch. Tribes don't agree on what's real, what's urgent, or who is to blame. Before you can even get to a shared solution, you have to agree that there is a shared problem. That's harder in 2026 than in a 1954 state park. This is where the danger sharpens. If tribes can't agree on superordinate goals, they create substitute goals that keep the conflict alive. Instead of, how do we fix the water? The question becomes, how do we make sure they don't get credit? Instead of, how do we stabilize our economy? It becomes, how do we stop their policies, even if our own are undefined? In the camp, the boys vandalized each other's property just to hurt the other side, even when it brought them no real benefit. Today, versions of that logic show up when leaders block policies that help their own constituents, simply because the other tribe proposed them, or when users mass report content not because it's harmful, but because it comes from the wrong side. There's another layer Sheriff's experiment hinted at, but couldn't fully explore: identity layering. The boys at camp had basically one salient identity at a time: eagle or rattler. Real adults have dozens: nationality, profession, religion, ethnicity, gender, subculture, fandoms, online communities. Tribal warfare becomes truly unstable when people stack identities in ways that leave no overlap with the other side. If every important identity you hold lines up with one tribe and none aligns with the opposite tribe, then compromise feels like self-erasure. You're not just conceding a policy point, you're betraying your entire sense of self. That's why small disagreements can feel existential. So where does this go? In Robbers Cave, the adults could change the rules. They could cut the water, rig the truck, design cooperative tasks. In 2026, most of the adults in the room are either captured by tribes themselves, afraid of their own bases, or financially dependent on the conflict. Leaders who try to de-escalate often get punished by their own side for being weak or traitors. Platforms that experiment with dialing down outrage risk losing engagement and revenue. Media outlets that refuse to feed tribal narratives lose market share to those that do. The structure is stuck in phase 2 and 3 incentives, while the costs move into phase 4. Here's the hard truth. Tribal warfare doesn't always end in reconciliation. Sometimes it ends in exhaustion, fragmentation, or force. Economies stall because no coalition can govern. Infrastructure crumbles because every project turns into a symbolic battle. People start looking not for dialogue, but for a strong hand to finally sort things out. At that point, the biggest risk isn't that tribes keep fighting endlessly. It's that one tribe, or a new actor entirely, uses the chaos to consolidate power in a way that makes future cooperation impossible. If this video is pushing you to see patterns you hadn't named before and you want more content at esse nível de profundidade, take a moment right now. Subscribe. Tell me if this is still interesting at this point, and if you're in a position to do it, consider the idea of supporting this work with something like a $100 contribution. For some people, that's impossible. For others, it's one dinner out. For this kind of long-form independent analysis, it's the difference between slowing down and doubling down. Because here's the last twist. In 1954, 22 boys walked out of Robbers Cave and eventually grew up. The experiment was a chapter in their lives. In 2026, there is no outside the camp. The tribal wiring is embedded in our platforms, our politics, our economies. We can't just get on a bus and leave. But we can do something Sheriff S. boys couldn't become conscious of the experiment while we re-still inside it. That doesn't magically solve tribal warfare, but it's the only way any of us can stop being just another rattler or eagle and start acting like the observers this system doesn't have and desperately needs.